Some of the most intelligent, emotionally aware people you'll ever meet are also the most exhausted. Not because they're doing too much, but because they're thinking too much. They replay conversations hours after they've ended. They analyze things no one else even noticed. And at night, when everything is quiet, their mind gets louder. Not with answers, but with questions. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I missed something? What if this goes wrong? And here's the strange part. This isn't happening because something is broken. It's happening because their mind is working exactly the way it was designed to, just without a way to turn it off. So what's actually going on inside a mind that never seems to stop? In this video, we're breaking down the psychology of overthinking. What's happening in your brain, why this pattern develops, and what it really reveals about who you are. Because this isn't just a bad habit you can switch off. It's a deeply wired mental process shaped by experience, biology, and perception. And once you understand it, you won't just see your thoughts differently. You'll understand yourself on a completely different level. Most people think overthinking is just worrying too much, but in psychology there's a more precise term: maladaptive rumination. It's when your mind gets stuck in loops, returning to the same thoughts over and over again, especially around past events, uncertainty, or social situations. And the difficult part is that it doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like you're doing something useful, like you're analyzing, understanding, trying to figure things out. But you're not actually moving forward. You're circling the same mental ground. The brain keeps reopening the same file, searching for a better answer that never fully arrives. You replay what you said, imagine what you could have said, simulate scenarios that haven't happened yet, and each time it feels like you're getting closer to clarity, but somehow you never do. Psychologists call this the illusion of mental progress. Because the mind is active, it feels productive, but in reality, it's just looping. There's no resolution, only repetition. And what makes this even more deceptive is that your brain doesn't recognize it as a problem. To your mind, this is problem solving. It's effort. Which is why overthinking is so hard to notice while it's happening. It doesn't feel like being stuck. It feels like trying. To understand why this happens, you have to look at the brain. Overthinking isn't just a habit, it's a pattern of neural activity. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for analysis, planning, and self-reflection, tends to stay highly active in people who overthink, even during moments that are supposed to be restful. At the same time, the default mode network is running in the background. This is the system responsible for your internal dialogue, the voice in your head that reflects, imagines, and replays experiences. In overthinkers, this system doesn't quiet down. It keeps generating thoughts, connecting dots, building scenarios. The result is a mind that's essentially always on, always reviewing, always preparing, always trying to anticipate what might happen next. It's like your brain is constantly running simulations, even when there's nothing immediate to solve. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Every time your brain engages in this kind of mental problem-solving, even imagined problem-solving, it releases small amounts of dopamine, the same chemical involved in motivation and reward. So even if you're not finding answers, your brain is still being rewarded for the act of thinking itself. Which means overthinking isn't just a pattern, it's something your brain is reinforcing. That's why it feels so difficult to stop. Because on a neurological level, your mind has learned that thinking more feels like doing something right. But this pattern doesn't come from nowhere. For many people, overthinking starts much earlier than they realize. It often develops in environments where things felt unpredictable, where reactions were inconsistent, or where small mistakes carried bigger consequences than expected. In those situations, the brain adapts. It learns to stay alert, to scan for patterns, to read between the lines. A child in that environment doesn't think, "I'm becoming an overthinker." What the brain learns instead is something much more practical. pay attention, anticipate, be prepared. Because if you can predict what's coming, maybe you can avoid getting hurt. Over time, that strategy becomes automatic. The mind starts running ahead of reality, trying to map every possible outcome before it happens. Not because something is wrong with you, but because at some point it worked. It helped you feel a sense of control in a situation where control was limited. And that's the part most people miss. Overthinking isn't a flaw. It's an adaptation. It's a highly intelligent system doing exactly what it was trained to do, protect you by staying one step ahead. The problem is, even when the environment changes, the pattern doesn't always turn off. Not all overthinking is the same. Psychologists usually distinguish between two patterns. The first is reflective rumination, where you turn inward to understand yourself, process emotions, and make sense of your experiences. In balance, this can actually be a strength. It's linked to self-awareness and emotional intelligence. But then there's brooding rumination. This is where the mind starts to dwell. Instead of gaining clarity, it fixates. The same thoughts repeat, but instead of insight, they create tension. This is where overthinking starts to affect sleep, decision-making, and even social confidence. You begin second-guessing yourself, replaying interactions, questioning things that don't have clear answers. And the difficult part is that most people move between both states. A moment of reflection can slowly turn into a spiral. And because the thinking feels active, like something is happening, it's hard to recognize when you've stopped processing and started looping. So what does this actually say about you? Because here's where the narrative gets it wrong. People who think too much are often labeled as anxious or overly sensitive, but research suggests something very different. Individuals who ruminate more also tend to score higher in cognitive empathy, the ability to understand how other people think and feel. You're not just reacting to what's said, you're processing tone, context, intention. You notice subtle shifts in behavior. You pick up on what others miss. That means your mind isn't just active, it's perceptive. It's constantly trying to make sense of complex emotional and social information. And that level of awareness comes with a cost. Because when you see more, you also have more to process. You feel the weight of possibilities. You think through outcomes before they happen. You care about how things affect others. And while that makes you deeply insightful, it also means your mind rarely gets a break. It keeps going, trying to refine, understand, and anticipate. So the exhaustion isn't random. It's the byproduct of a mind that notices everything. And this leads to a truth most people never hear. You can't think your way out of every problem. No matter how much analysis you apply, some things don't resolve through logic alone, because not every situation is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be felt, decided, or let go. But for someone who overthinks, that's incredibly difficult. The mind keeps searching for the perfect answer, the perfect certainty, the one thought that will finally bring relief. And it never quite arrives. Not because you're missing something, but because clarity doesn't always come from more thinking. This is why many therapeutic approaches don't focus on stopping thoughts, but on changing your relationship to them, learning to notice a thought without immediately following it, to recognize, this is my mind trying to solve something, without getting pulled into the loop. Because the real shift isn't in controlling your thoughts. It's in no longer needing to. Overthinking isn't a flaw. It's a mind that learned to stay alert for a reason. A mind that became skilled at noticing patterns, reading situations, and trying to stay one step ahead of uncertainty. But at some point, that same mind has to learn something new. Not how to think more, but how to feel safe enough to think less. Because the goal was never to eliminate your thoughts. It's to stop being controlled by them. So maybe the real question is your mind protecting you or exhausting you?